Assalamu alaikum. May the peace and blessings of God be with you. My name is Sue Obeidi, and I am the director of the Muslim Public Affairs Council's Hollywood Bureau, MPAC Hollywood Bureau for short. We work in the industry to change the narrative around Muslims and Islam. For more information on our organization, please visit mpachollywoodbureau.org. Today's panel, Tropes and Truths, a conversation on Afghan Americans, industry, and the making of the United States of AL, is in partnership with the Afghan American Foundation. Due to prevailing circumstances, the United States of AL, which is on Thursday nights on CBS, is one of the most important shows on television right now. And on behalf of MPAC's Hollywood Bureau and on behalf of the Afghan American Foundation, we are honored to bring you this discussion today. Before I hand it over to my friend, my colleague, and board member of the Afghan American Foundation, Joseph Azam, I just want to thank the moderator, our panelists, and all of you for tuning in today. Thank you for joining us and enjoy the conversation. Joseph?
Thank you, Sue, and thank you to MPAC for its partnership on this event. As Sue mentioned, my name is Joseph Azam. I'm a lawyer, also a board member of the Afghan American Foundation. I wanted to just briefly start off today by talking about two things. One, I wanted to mention what our foundation does, and then two, I wanted to talk about why we thought this event was critical in this moment. Our foundation is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization focused on thought leadership, advocacy, and public engagement for the Afghan American community. And when this opportunity came up, we realized that this is probably the most important moment in our diaspora so far, and it was one that we wanted to capitalize on. So, who is our constituency? By conservative estimates, there are around 400,000 Afghans currently in the United States. That number is expanding, as you all probably know. About 34% of them are born in the US, everybody else outside, and most of everybody else born in Afghanistan. But they're not our only constituency. Based on a UN population division estimate in 2020, there are almost 6 million Afghans who are outside of Afghanistan living as refugees under other different status. So part of why we wanted to have this conversation is because we think that the work that the folks you're going to hear from doing tonight are doing is going to impact those people as well. It's not going to affect just Afghans in the US, it's going to affect the 6 million who are outside, and it's going to affect them in the following ways. I think in this moment in particular, there's a lot of work to be done around narrative building and narrative development. Sue mentioned that. For us, particularly given the situation with the arrivals and the refugees that are going to be coming to the US, there's a lot of work to be done around ensuring that their transition is smooth and the reception is the one that they deserve. And interestingly, there was a study that came out, a press release, I think this week, from the Migration Policy Institute, and it talked about, what are the factors of building immigrant narratives? And there were a couple of things that I think are really relevant for our conversation tonight, and I think Lorraine's going to touch on. One is that top-down doesn't work. So our leaders can say what they want to say, but ultimately, the way narratives are built are based on people's lived experiences. And so, what shapes those understandings, what shapes those narratives for people, and what really tugs on their heartstrings is some of what we're going to talk about tonight. The second is, the type of insecurities that our communities are going to be dealing with. Those are driven by insecurities around economics, culture and identity, personal safety, or national security. And I think United States of AL actually touched on all of those in very significant ways. And we want to be a part of the conversation that helps shape that work. And finally, I think the window is small, and our foundation talks about this a lot. There's always a tipping point between acceptance and insecurity. And so for us, this is a really important window for our community to really double down on acceptance, getting people to understand who's coming into their communities and invest in a community that's been in the US for a long time, but is growing at a rapid pace. So we're grateful for this opportunity, certainly for the creative folks and the talent who we're going to be hearing from today, and most of all for our moderator Lorraine Ali. Lorraine is a television critic from Los Angeles Times. She's an award-winning journalist who's an LA native. She's written publications ranging from the New York Times to GQ to Rolling Stone, and was formerly the Times music editor, and before that, a senior writer and a critic for Newsweek magazine. So Lorraine, we're privileged to have you guide this conversation, and with this and with deep gratitude, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Joseph. And thank you all for tuning in and being here. I cannot think of a more timely television show to be talking about right now. And a little background on United States of Al, in case you don't know. It is a half-hour comedy, and it follows the friendship of a Marine who served in Afghanistan and his former interpreter, Al, who he brings over. It's very difficult to bring him over. And they settle with Riley's father in Columbus, Ohio, and all sorts of stuff happens. It's fun, it's funny, but it's also incredibly topical. So let's just jump right in, because the second season just kicked off this month and there's plenty to talk about. So I'd like to first introduce Reza Aslan, who's the executive producer. Reza, there you are, hello. And Mahyad Tousi, who's also executive producer and writer. And if I'm leaving something out, if writer, creator, please jump in, correct me. Azita Ghanizada, and I'm sure I just screwed that up, and I'm so sorry if I did. She plays Ariana in the show. Hello. And last but not least, Fahim Anwar, who plays Mo. He's also a stand-up comedian here in Los Angeles, very funny. No pressure, but you just need to be funny, okay?
No,
so no pressure. Okay. So I just want to start off, with, while you're making the second season, what is the timing here? Because I was watching the first episode, and the first episode of the second season, Mahyad and Reza, you're looking at, essentially, you're looking at Al's sister being trapped in Afghanistan as the Taliban's taking over. So I can't imagine this was the plan to kick off the second season with this. Can you just talk about, did you have to rip up the plan, and how fast was it to put that episode together?
Well, we knew from the moment that President Biden announced that he would go along with the former guy's plan to remove all troops from Afghanistan that we were going to have to address that. This show, even in the first season, was constantly addressing the changing political landscape, both here in the US and in Afghanistan. So we had made kind of a long-term plan about how we were going to address those, the changing situation. We, I think, internally just kind of assumed, as awful as it sounds to say, that the Taliban was going to take over the country. We even had an amazing scene with Azita, actually, and Adir in an episode in the first season in which we just flat out said, this is going to happen. We just thought we would have more than a weekend before it happened. And so while the scripts that we had written and produced had that assumption in the background, we did, with the fall of Kabul, the sudden fall of Kabul, have to just rethink at least that first episode and how we were going to address it. And really, we just took the cue from the Afghan writers and producers in the room, many of whom had vulnerable family members in Afghanistan that were desperately trying to get out. And so in a weird way, it was kind of one of these life imitates art kind of situations, or maybe it's art imitates life in this situation, because we knew we were going to write about it. We knew even that we were going to set the episode during the fall of Kabul. But when it came time to figuring out exactly what the story was going to be, we started looking around and seeing the situation with the vets in our room and the Afghans in our room working together with people on the ground in Afghanistan and other people around the world in order to, get these family members out. And we thought, that's our story. That's the story right there. And so we began to write an episode that was essentially a fictionalized version of the very real trauma that we were dealing with in the writer's room.
See, and I think that's one of the things that's so important about the series is that, and it boils this down too far, but humanizing the situation, right? It's not just, the media jumping in for, the moment that they do in Afghanistan because they ignored it for the last, 15 years. But it is, you know, humanizing this situation. It's putting a face on it. It's showing you these stories of what's going on behind it. And I can assume the writers and perhaps all of you have stories coming out of Afghanistan, of family members, of people you know. Mahyad, what is it like? This is a comedy, right? But obviously this is not. What do you do when the moment is not funny?
Look, I think we had a very when the Taliban took Herat, which was sort of Thursday before the weekend when Kabul fell, we had a conversation which was, okay, look, this is going to happen a lot faster, and it was not just about what do we do about the show. It's also, we have 10 Afghan colleagues and we've got veterans, some of whom served in Afghanistan. And so, there are some things you're trained for. There are other things you're not. Like, how do you deal with mental health stuff? And how do you actually sort of, how do we deal with this situation? Some of our colleagues are people who have very direct links, ongoing links. Some are people who are more diaspora, who've left for a long time, but still have emotional and ties to the homeland. But some quite literally had family members who they felt responsible for because they were there, because they told them they should go and do a job there, for instance. I mean, it was a very, very delicate situation. And so going into it, first it was like, okay, what do we do? And it was to listen to the Afghans in the room to see how they felt and try to just cope with what was happening. This was Monday, right? So it was when all of those horrific images were coming in, we were all in the room together. And so it was just really, at that point, it was just really about holding each other up. Those of us, like, I worked in conflict zones for years. I was in Afghanistan for 6 months between 2002 and 2003. And other, for me, like, I can assure, it was re-traumatizing. Like, my PTSD was coming back, like, wow, that weekend and that week, so this was happening, and what was happening was very real. We weren't really thinking about the funny part of it. It was, okay, so what do we do? How do we do this in a responsible way where we actually think about sort of ourselves and the situation that was affecting our colleagues? And then out of that process, as Reza said, came both the realization of what is the story, but also sort of the realization that we don't need to write to jokes. Not everything, there is no comedy here. And Maria, who's our one of the two showrunners, she said, let's not do it. Let's not write to jokes. We don't need to write it. We don't need to have one single joke, but it's, so we knew. And then what was amazing was that it was echoed. Chuck echoed the same exact sentiment to the four of us. When Maria, Dave, Reza, and I went up to talk to Chuck. It was like, don't, forget about jokes. We're gonna let's get rid of the laugh track. And it was like, okay, great. It was such a interesting experience because it connected. Tragedy in some ways sometimes, has this impact of connecting people. And this tragedy really connected all of us. And at the same time as we were in the writer's room doing this stuff, Azita and Fahim, and who's always with us in the writer's room, was actually on stage because they were rehearsing the episode that plays on Thursday. So there was the Afghans who were with us, not on the stage, but in this building where we are now. And then there were the 4 Afghans who were on set, doing the episode that we're going to watch on Thursday. So nobody, from the PAs to all of the crew, to everyone in the writer's room, all the way up to the execs at CBS and Warner, no one got to go through the experience of that week and the fall of Kabul without being directly in proximity and in communication with Afghans who, which changes things. It really, really has an impact. You can't, it's one thing to watch a conflict from your couch at home or from thousands of miles away. It's another thing when someone that you communicate with is directly impacted by it in the way that our colleagues were, and that changed all of us. And I think that we had at that point I think we knew that we were going to be okay, At least we're going to be okay figuring it out how it goes, but we didn't know what was going to happen on the ground, right? The tough part was, all right, how is this going to, like, we didn't know what was going to happen the next day. We didn't know, like, were there going to be any flights out? Like, how do you write a rescue story? Will there be a rescue? You know, who are they going to leave behind? You know, we knew people were going to be left behind, but who? So there was such level of complexity, and it was all happening so quickly. You know, sitcoms, we do 22 episodes a year. It's madness, right? We're working week in and week out. Like, so we're already working at a crazy schedule. Suddenly, in the middle of that, having to write a new episode and you know, with everything that was happening at the same time, and trying to also, you know, help whoever we could in all the ways that we needed to. You know, it took us 2 weeks to write the episode. We wrote we delivered the episode the day of the end of the deadline, August 31st, when the Americans pulled out. And then we had a table read that Friday. And then once the table read happened and the actors actually performed it, when everybody at CBS was watching, because obviously they were concerned about how we were going to take this on. Everybody was watching, because we got texts and messages afterwards. And, you know, and we were all like, you know, like what I was telling Reza when we were on set is, like, I took all of my energy not to start like belly crying during the table read, you know, because it was the weeks preceding it was so difficult. You know, these were not unfamiliar words. We were working on, you know, it was so much work to put that episode together, but experiencing it was really, really incredibly difficult, but also liberating, and just seeing how the crew was impacted by it. And how everybody came together and all the hugs. It was really something.
It does capture the real urgency of that moment and the not knowing. And I wanted to ask you, Azita and Fahim, but Azita first, just in terms of, people use representation, the word, a lot and throw it around, but here it really, really matters, especially right now with the series handling a situation like this. You have been, you've done a lot of TV, you've done a lot of film. What did it mean to be involved in something where there's actually representation behind the camera, in front of the camera? I mean, it sounds basic, but it's so rare.
Thanks for the question, Lorraine. And thanks for your question to Mahyad as well. I think I just wanted to piggyback on something that he said, that even though this is a sitcom, I think the show is strongest in its moments of endearment and truth. I think that the show has really represented itself, covering the landscape of important things in a meaningful way. And so even though it is a sitcom and they do write for the jokes, I think when they write for the heart, it's one of those, you know, it's something that happens rarely, because it's something that's occurring right now. It's very meta, it's very odd to be experiencing this while you're living it. You know, we talk about representation matters, and a lot of the time that's just something that is performatory. You know, people do it so they can put, you know, a Black person or a Latin person there, and that one person is responsible for representing everybody of that specific identity. And that's how the, you know, question and answer has been, you know, solved by that kind of performative representation. And throughout my years in the business, there have been many opportunities to play Afghan in like war things, and a number of narratives that just like, I didn't want to continue to be a part of that kind of storytelling. So experiencing, you know, a number of Afghans in Hollywood is so rare for me, because I was always the only one in any set, in any room, kind of championing along our culture and saying, this is where I am. I'm not going to change that. I'm not going to hide that. So to have this group of people there, specifically during this time, you know, last season, I think coming in as Ariana and expressing the things that needed to be expressed from her, I still wasn't sure, you know, where she was and what she was doing and what was going on with everything. But specifically this season, having this kind of collective community be able to raise their voice and not allow people to turn off the TV. to tune out of just the news, right? It's disappearing from headline news. But every week there's just a little bit more that CBS is doing, and we get to see a little bit more from like a little bit more of these mentions about Afghanistan, and it's making people more curious. So that's been really lovely. But to be there the week that Kabul collapsed, I just don't know how anybody was really functioning. And we were lucky to have each other and to be able to disappear into creating some art at those moments where we could put our head down and create some art together. But the creators and the showrunner were very mindful to take breaks. They knew that a lot of us had been working around the clock on evacuations and things like that. So they were very mindful to say, take breaks. If you need to go sit down, if you need a minute. Also, on the phone, like I'd leave my phone in the dressing room, and after a break, I'd run back to, and I would be doing things on the computer and trying to help a number of people, even I think probably on this panel and members of the, Afghan American Foundation, trying to help them figure out what's going on, get communication on the ground, what's going on in Kabul, how can we help, who can we help, who can get on flights, who can we get money for in that space, and then go back to set and play in the story, and really, I think also hold people accountable and responsible of like, we have this honor of being able to share this human story. And so we're gonna try our best to do it and to make these important moments matter. And then also try and create some levity and show Afghans in a way that they've never been shown on television before.
Right, and I wanna talk about this a little later, but particularly women, because that is like a big mystery to many Americans, and especially in scripted television. It's abysmal the way that that's been handled. We can tackle that a little later in this conversation, but yeah, I mean, I'm so thankful that that is here in this series. So Fahim, what was it like for you, or what is it like for you being involved in this series? Because I know also you can correct me if I'm wrong, but doing stand-up, doing comedy, I mean, I can imagine also being an actor, some of the roles that have been out there for you, has it been like terrorist number one, terrorist number two, or has it been like, what has it been?
I mean, that's definitely always on the table, that's just a given. Like, if you want that, that is there. But I've always made a very conscious decision when I entered the entertainment industry that I didn't want to do that. And I think I was lucky that I had stand-up as an outlet, and that was like a path for me to forge down. So I wasn't reliant just purely as an actor because some that's their only way in, and those are the only roles being offered. But I had stand-up, so I was able to just tell my people that I don't want to go out for any terrorist roles, because that doesn't help me as a comedian or what I'm trying to build as an artist. But then it's very cool to work on a show like this, where there are roles for people of color and Afghans and such, where these are three-dimensional characters and they are portrayed in a nuanced and positive light. And I posted a picture today, Azita did as well, just the episode for this week, the first Afghan family on television, where we're just a normal Afghan family on an American sitcom TV show, which is insanity. I never thought, like, when I first got in the biz, that I would ever see that on a Thursday night. And it's cool to be in the writer's room as well, and the other Afghan writers as well, to flesh out these stories and inject our upbringing and our point of view. And you see it with promises, like a writer's room without the composition that ours has, a promises it doesn't get made. And that's like I think a watershed moment in television, really, and also for Afghans, because it's a very nuanced portrayal and very real of what was going on. And if you don't have Afghans in the room, that story doesn't get told.
And why not, to start with, like, when you're thinking about, making this, pitching this, putting this out there, why not go for like a nichier streamer type thing? Because this is like, this is reaching really mainstream. And I could say, yes, great, grand. And that could be the idea. Yes, it's grand that it can do that. but it's also super risky, right? Because a nichier streamer, because everyone's like, what about Rami? What about, whatever it is. I knew I was going to bring that up, right?
Yeah, those are great shows. We love those shows. And
they're great.
We love what they're able to do in that medium. There's a luxury of the 1 hour single cam or just single cam that's more grittier on cable. But then there's a further reach with network. Like, you can't take as many risks and be as nuanced as you can with those shows that we love as well. But you're able to kind of like hit hearts and minds of people who would normally be closed off to even knowing someone like this, and like giving a human portrayal is like, there's value in that as well.
It's funny, the American sitcom through history has been one of the things that has broken ground for new identities, right? And we don't really think of that, but if we really look throughout time, the American sitcom, from like Norman Lear and, moving forward, like MASH and all of these things, even to Blackish and to Fresh Off the Boat, they, created it's complicated, right? Because especially when it's a new storyline, Afghans on a sitcom, then the people get nervous about the jokes and who's the butt of the joke and who's responsible for the joke and all of those other things. But really kind of breaking through that American sitcom and then bringing them into your home every week creates this kind of different kind of like familial value in the fabric that is American culture. So it's interesting to have the sitcom and have it be focused in this kind of Afghan American lens and Afghan lens part of the time that the show does, because it then becomes a fabric of American culture through that, where these kinds of nuanced, dramatic these are incredible shows that like we love, but I think that being a part of something like a sitcom is historical more so than just the normal 1 hour drama that we normally see.
Yeah, and you're introducing
we've
people.
been trying to do it.
Sorry, you're introducing people to the family as well. Whereas like Rami, who's a friend, and I love the show, sometimes it's preaching to the choir. Like, the people who watch it, for the most part, are already very open-minded and accepting of the idea. Whereas this may actually hit some people who didn't think that way, or maybe weren't as accepting to, say, an Afghan family on television.
Yeah, look, Reza and I've been doing this, 2005, and we always knew, look, we don't do, we have many projects that are in many different places, and so we've always been very agnostic in terms of the kind of things that we do. But one thing has always been clear is, all right, it was really important to figure out a sitcom formula that would work. And this is the third time.
It's our third, it's our third attempt.
Third attempt.
On this one, or were there
no, in general, just in terms of
other sitcoms. And
so yeah, so 12 years, 13 years and 3 sitcoms, and this is the third one. And so it's first of all, it's incredibly difficult to tell a story in 22 minutes. That's how much time we have. And so it's not that it's any easier, or it's just a different form. And then you consider the fact that it's multicam and live audience. It's a lot more like Promises in many ways. Feels like a play, a 2-set play, where so it's a different medium of storytelling. It's one that is very accessible. It allows you to tell stories about characters and in a way that is easily digestible and understood. It uses comedy, which is probably the most important way of actually communicating difficult, complicated things. It doesn't make it easier, but so it was a no-brainer, really. I think a lot of times, and network is very specific: who it reaches, the legacy that it has, the part of the country that it reaches, the depth and breadth of the nature of the audience. And we knew that we had already a built-in audience of millions, and we just had to make sure that we make it millions more so that we can stay on air, right? That was but that's nothing to, if, we come from a part of the world in which storytelling and has everything to do with being a better human being and living in a better society. They're not divorced things. Like the idea of entertainment for entertainment's sake does not really compute, because every story I ever heard was always about what was it about and why did you hear it. And so that's the part of the world that we come from. Storytelling is part and parcel to community building and living in a society that is healthy, and learning how to be a better human being, etc. All of those things. And so, we've never been highbrow about, oh, this story is better than that kind of a story, or that you need to be complicated in order to be good, or those terms are, I think, misused and thrown around and weaponized, sadly, in some ways in these days, where really the important thing is, I'm going to tell a story. Like, you had to show up in a village, tell a story, and hopefully you didn't get, pelted with eggs and tomatoes, and you went on to the next one. Like, that's what storytelling was. And that storytelling, you had to entertain the people. You had to give them something to, so that they let you in the back, so the elders let you in the next time you came around. And you had to, do it in a meaningful way and move on. So I think that's the tradition of storytelling that we care about and we come from. And sitcoms are the height of that in many ways, and so, yeah, there's nothing, we're this was huge for us that we were able to get a sitcom on air like this, and to have this team and to be able to put it together in this way. It's just a dream come true.
And the sitcom, somebody chimed in the chats, and I just like, when Fahim and I talk about like it not being as niche as like a 1 hour drama and the audience that it reaches, we just mean that, audiences in general throughout in the primetime hour, they don't necessarily have access to a lot of Afghans, right? So unless they're seeing them on the news, and then what we're seeing on the news is usually hysteria and chaos. It's war and displacement. It's stories that are a part of the culture, or it's a terrorist narrative, or it's violent in some way, shape, or form. And so that's the only information they have. So being on a primetime sitcom provides the 7 p.m. nightly news viewer who stays on and watches the CBS sitcom the opportunity to actually see the real, like a human side of an Afghan family here in the United States, as opposed to what they saw on the 7 o'clock news.
Right. And what were, well, first off, how did Chuck Lorre, I'm sure you've talked about this, but how did that happen? That's amazing, because for those of you out there who don't know, he's like the king of sitcoms, like, Big Bang Theory, Third Rock. I mean, he is the man. How did that happen?
Well, I'd been friends for many, many years with Dave Getch, who's, along with Maria Ferrari, co-creator of United States of Al. Dave, a longtime writer on The Big Bang Theory. And he and I have always wanted to work together. We've been friends, as I say, for a long time, but of course he was, very much stuck with the golden handcuffs that was The Big Bang Theory. But when they announced their final season, it was kind of right around then that he started thinking to himself, okay, what do I want to do next? The thing about Chuck is he's got this whole farm league going on, right? Where he just kind of develops these writers and he brings them in and he starts them off as staff writers and slowly moves them up. And then a lot of his shows, in fact, I think actually all of his shows, his current shows, are run by people who were staffed on previous shows. And so I think Dave understood that, one, he wanted to do something meaningful, that he wanted to work with us, and two, that he knew how to get Chuck to be excited about something. And the one thing that I'll say about Chuck Lorre is that, at a certain point, you've got all the accolades, you've got all the money in the world, you've set all the records. You know what I mean? Like, what do you want to do next? Is I think where he's at. And when we brought him the idea for this show, to his credit, I mean, he immediately jumped at it. And at every stage of the way, interestingly, he's been the one who has been pushing us to sort of push the boundaries and to do things in a different way. And sometimes, you know, we find ourselves like we're the ones who are thinking to ourselves, well, is this what a sitcom would do? And he's like, who cares what a sitcom would do? Let's do something else. So it's a huge benefit to have someone who has that much power and who has already done everything and just wants to do something different and new, and who also gives you kind of the freedom, once he trusts you, gives you the freedom to sort of really make your voice heard. So it's no exaggeration to say that I don't think any of this would have worked without Chuck Lorre. I think if we had taken this project to any other network, they would have thrown us out of the room. They would have been like, get the hell out of here. We're not doing this. But once you have Chuck on your side, then, you know, you can pretty much do whatever you want to it.
You have the juice, right? And then can you just talk a little bit about the reaction from different communities when the series first premiered, from Afghan community, because the reactions were very different coming from different areas. And I wrote a piece about this when it came out. So can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Look, we have been doing this for a long time. We're also ourselves we know the Hollywood what Hollywood do adversely. So the trauma is something that we connect with and understand. And so when the show was announced, there was the marketing stuff started coming out, which is not the show, it's the marketing around the show, and there was obviously the natural backlash by all the people who carry in their body the trauma of having to be Muslim or from the Middle East, or who have seen their identity sort of dragged through the mud. And obviously you think of a sitcom, which is sort of a primetime sitcom on a Thursday night at 8:30. This, it just scares people in all the ways that does. And so that did happen. What was interesting was that, obviously this wasn't our first rodeo. We've been around for a long time, and we've been doing stuff with various different identities within what we call sort of our collective identity, which is from the greater Middle East, a part of the world where there's always been a traditional storytelling and a fluidity that was borderless, right? And so we always felt that there was a commonality across this part of the world that had to do with culture that predated even the religion itself. So we've been down this road before with many communities, and specifically also with the Afghan community, and so much of what we do is about making sure that you engage into conversations with the community, and that they are aware of what you're doing, and that you are in some sort of a thought partnership, with also the people who can benefit from what you're doing, right? As artists who are also activists, like I call us artists / activists, because I think those two things are separate things that need to be, you can't wear those two hats at the same time. You have to keep taking them off and putting the other one on. Azita does it really well, as you can see in this episode on Thursday, which is unbelievable that she actually was able to do it like that. But as artists / activists, for us, it's really important to think about, all right, you're going to create a piece of content that actually is going to affect people, open their hearts, have them see the world in a different place, be activated by it somehow. And then how do you actually then pass the baton to people who are doing the real work, right? If we are in the consciousness space of actually changing people's hearts and minds and making them more receptive to certain things, then who are the people who are actually doing the real work, or working with people on the ground who are trying to make changes on the policy side, on the legal side, on the activism side, on the outreach side, and make sure that we have a relationship with them so that they can be more effective and we can support them in that way. And so we'd already started these conversations. We'd already had one sort of a meeting with the Afghan community, and we had another one that was that Monday after the sort of the trailer came out. That was already pre-scheduled, obviously. And so it was really interesting to preview the episodes with the community and then be in that conversation with them and really hearing all that feedback. And so much of it was anxiety that we could relate to and understand. But I think generally speaking, what we have heard from the Afghan community has been overwhelmingly positive, especially the ones who are here, who can see the show itself. And what we said from the beginning was, look, you know, that's a trailer. We've got 13 episodes in the first season, now 22 episodes, and we get to tell a long story. You know, we can't fit everything into 22 minutes. And that's not the way it works, right? So, you know, and judge us by what we accomplish in the course of this show. And we're in an open conversation, and we're happy to be in that conversation.
Yeah, and I think there's also that thing of, like you said, you know, people are raw. I mean, I'm Iraqi, you know, Muslim, and if seeing yourself or not seeing yourself on screen, or seeing yourself or your family or the people you love or the area you're from, seeing it so misrepresented for so long, you're waiting for that thing to correct it. And the idea that one thing is going to just correct it all, like it just carries a lot of weight. You know what I mean? There's a lot of expectations. And I think it's just like impossible for anything to do that, let alone, I mean, I just think there's a lot of expectation and hope, and that's really hard. It's just hard. It's hard. And that's what I was saying. It's brave and it's risky to do a series like that because of that, as well as it's being misinterpreted by more mainstream, or it being, you know, there's all those things, and you guys have threaded that needle. So congratulations on that, because that is not easy.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
I think also, just Lorraine, like our community has just been through so much trauma, like specifically Afghans for 40 years, like most of us are displaced. Like there's so much trauma, and like you said, that fear and everything that comes with that's living in their body of like, how are we going to be talked about? Like we don't want this. And so it's completely understood for those that got panicked. I've received so many messages from people that had been able to watch it internationally, that really like love the opportunity to actually hear Dari or Pashto on screen. And that always makes me feel excited. But in the conversation of like representation, something I always mention is like, you get dozens of white shows, like shows centered around white families or you know, storytelling about these things that miss the mark or fail, and then they get to fail up, right? They get to fail up. So it's like, whenever it's like around an identity that's not represented as much, right? It's like, you got to get it perfect, or else you're going to fail, and then you're not going to get another chance, right? Because it's so specific, they're going to look at it and go, well, we can't do it again because that one didn't work, right? That's how Hollywood works. So it's like, no, actually, all the shows that are centered around like, you know, your normal white storytelling, they can have hundreds and hundreds of bad shows, and then they can still go on and make more bad shows or good shows, and then get the one hit or whatever. So it's just so much pressure, like you had said, in that one space to like get it all right. But I think they've been doing a wonderful job. It's just like 2 cents.
Did you want to say something, Reza?
No, I think I may have made a slight noise in it, and the screen suddenly went to me.
It did. So I just wanted to come back to the idea of Muslim women, but particularly Afghan women on television. You just don't see them in scripted TV, period. Unless it's a joke, and it's like Larry David making a joke, you know, and you know, and it's some sort of horrible burqa joke. And I think that is also what I really, really appreciate about the series, is that it sounds basic, but there's an Afghan woman in that who actually is a person, who has a personality, who has a backstory, who has, you know, who is a character, who is not just a burqa running through the scene for comedy's sake, or for, you know, to depict a horrible situation of war and oppression. So I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that, because there's something just so refreshing about that.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is back to the previous conversation. This is what representation means. We in this industry, we tend to talk about representation only when it comes to who's in front of the camera. But, you know, there are people who put words in the actor's mouth. And so the storytelling is done in the room. So if there's no representation in the room, I'm sorry, but it really doesn't matter to me what color skin the actor has. In our case, we have Afghan women who are writing about Afghan women. And we have Afghan men who are writing about Afghan men. And we have veterans, by the way, who are writing about veterans. You know, the one thing that I'm most proud of, and I think that is truly revolutionary about this show, isn't that it's the first network television show ever with a Muslim protagonist. It's that the room is made up of people that whose stories we're telling, you know, and if, you know, people in the audience who are not in the industry, this may seem like the most obvious and logical thing in the world. You're like, well, duh, of course.
Yeah.
You're going to tell a story about veterans and Afghans, you should have a room full of veterans and Afghans. Like, doesn't that make sense? Yeah, except that that's just not how Hollywood works, right? You usually have white guys putting words in the mouths of, you know, Afghan women. And so why are you're surprised at the way that Afghan women are traditionally represented on screen? Well, it's because it's the people who put words in their mouths. And so for us, it was just a very basic thing that I'm not saying it was easy, we had to fight for it. I would say about half of our writers' room, this is their first writing gig.
Wow.
This is the first writer's room they've ever been in. And that for a 22 episode a year CBS network sitcom is a big deal. You know, you usually fill those rooms with, you know, people who have done this forever. But again, you know, thanks to the leadership of Dave and Maria, the co-creators, and the encouragement of Chuck Lorre, you know, we were able to insist that the room represents the stories that we are trying to tell. I know a lot of people sometimes when they'll see some of the foibles that Al gets into, you know, there sometimes we'll get criticisms like, that's stereotypical, that's not real. Everything that has happened to Al has its roots in something that has happened to one of the Afghans in our room, or one of their family members, or something like that. You know, that's where these stories come from.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, I think we should also talk about the fact that we spoke to dozens of interpreters, male and female, while we're doing the pilot, before we sold the show, after we sold the show and had that long wait because of COVID, and continue to do so. And people who not just Afghan interpreters, but also Marines, veterans, people who, you know, like for instance, there's a whole storyline with Hasina, Al's sister, who vaccinates children across Afghanistan. We spoke to the people who were doing that. And so yes, the stories are culled from actual stories in reality, in real people. That's what we've done. But representation, just to add to what Reza was saying, is that this is in some ways something we've all talked about theoretically, like this idea of representation and what it really means. So here's a show that has on-screen representation, writers' room representation. You have Reza and I, who are execs on the show, exec producer on the show, who sit at every. So we are in every. There is very little conversation that happens about this show that there isn't representation in, right? And so the experiment is, does that mean the show is successful? Does that, you know, because at the end of the day, this is an industry. It's about economics, right? So does representation translate into a successful show, or does it not? You know, and that's sort of the experiment we're in. That's the battle that we're fighting. And it's exciting. You know, this is the one we wanted, and we're here doing it. And so representation does matter, and this is representation, period.
And I was going to just jump in and throw a couple questions in here that people were asking. We can go back and forth on this and talk in between, but somebody was an anonymous attendee. That's their name. What doors do you see this opening for Afghans? And I suppose you can go as wide with that question as you want, whether it's in television or whether it is in terms of how Americans view them if they are here. I don't know, but take that away.
Azita, you want to put your activist hat on and answer that question, because you're probably the best.
Fahim looked like he had an answer.
Oh,
because I've had this thought. I think
I could see his thinking.
My wheels turning.
We're very close now, so I don't know how much.
Yeah,
he's my brother now, so I know him well.
I find that this show is just like on the talent side, and just as like Afghan artists, I think it's very cool how this show has served as a scaffolding for other talented Afghan artists to come aboard, being like the writers' room being propagated with Afghan writers. And then like when the show first came out, we didn't think to have Azita come on, but the scaffolding is there, and then she's been wonderful, and then there's more stories to explore in that area. And then I got to be in this episode as the brother, and these aren't things that you think about out the gate, but once you have a show like this built, then you just draw. It's a great bridge for opportunity for other Afghans, and I think that's really neat and cool that I didn't think about until I was in it.
I love that answer. I wouldn't think of it in that way, but that's so smart. Yeah, I mean, the thing that I think is really important, it's something we do in our educational trainings. We're talking about, in general, people from these parts of the world, all over Central and South Asia and the Middle East and North Africa. It's really hard to find a lot of comedian actors, right? There, like a lot of actors don't get the opportunity from those parts of the world, especially the men. Like the opening question was like, you were an actor in Hollywood, Fahim, like how many terrorist parts did you get? And that's sadly not a joke, right? That's the truth. And there's no shame in that. People have to pay their bills. And those are, 50% of the opportunities that are going to come their way, if not more. And so to have the opportunity to have a show full time with 22 episodes, to even have an extra 3 or 4, you get 3 or 4 extra male Afghan characters that get to build a comedy resume. Right. And so then maybe when the next, show with an Afghan comedic lead and they need somebody who has that history, then you get someone who's done it because they had the United States about to build that muscle with and that tool with. I've never really done sitcom either. So it's a learning curve for me. And I'm learning as I go so much every episode, but still, even for me, who's been in the business for 17 years, it's always a little bit drama heavy or girl next door or whatever it was. And so these are some of the things in front of the camera that I think this kind of a show offers long term. Again, like Fahim said, you don't think about it, but then you're like, he's going to find this cool, live music show that they're going to go on a date to. And then all of a sudden you get live Afghan music and you get Afghan musicians, they go on the date. And then so we get real live Afghan musicians and you get to experience this other aspect of it. And then you have Afghan musicians have their music featured on the show and so forth and so forth. And so I think that that's kind of a little bit of that space. And it's all about, for in the industry specifically, it's resume building. It's, who have you worked with? Do you have experience? Can you get in the room? Can we trust you on a set? Do you know the lingo? Like, do you know what we're talking about when we're talking about working for the joke, or this is a 3, or, turn this moment, whatever it is, like hit your mark, look at this camera, all these things that like a lot of people from our cultures don't have that because they've been gate kept from it. So that's, I think, a part of that, as well as like expanding on the writer's room and then kind of bringing in, one of the, I think Hila has, and they work really closely on like bringing in authentic production design elements and photographs and food and all these things that really kind of add to the texture of the storytelling. And it's all authentically Afghan. And so not only does it feed commerce directly into the Afghan community because we're supporting these small businesses, but it's also expanding people's point of view and what they really get to see about Afghan specific culture behind the scenes in that way. So those are some of the like smaller things too that kind of get impacted that we don't really think about. But it's not a business that just serves the 8 of us, you know, the showrunners that you talk about, the writers that you talk about, or the actors you talk about. There's hundreds of people that are, you know, making music, and we're buying flowers from, and we're getting their photographs from, and so on. And you know, Kasim's Kebab has the Afghan sweets, and we like buy out the Afghan sweet store from this Afghan, there's a shop in the OC, and like they come in and they deliver truck full of rut and jalebi and like all the desserts and, you know, all the different things. And so, you know, it's just a way that it does expand representation, and it does feedback into the community in some small way, however it can.
The only thing I would add to that, and I think those are all the right answers, the only thing I would add to that is that if you ask most of us who are from that part of the world who are in this industry, for very few of us, this was the career idea that we planned for ourselves or the parents planned for ourselves. And that has a lot to do with the fact that a failure of imagination, right? When you don't see people like yourself on television, then you can't imagine yourself being in those positions. When you don't see successful people in the arts in your community, you don't tell your kids, yeah, go be a writer, go be an actor. Right? We as this community, I say this, I've been saying this for 15 years now. I can't believe it's still valid, which is we care about how we look, right? So all our parents are like, look good, you got to get dressed right. You know, like my mom still goes crazy that I have a beard because she doesn't like it. I'm Iranian. and so we are so obsessed with how we present, right? Our families are. Culturally, it's really important that you present well. Yet we've forgotten our face. And what do I mean by that? Our face as community is our artists. That's our face. And yet we undervalue our artists as a community more than any other profession. Go be a doctor, do anything. Don't be an artist, right? The artists don't get the community support. There is no cultural centers that serve young artists who want to become playwrights and to act and to write, you know, to be cultivated. But then we expect that representation to be there, right? We have to be able to call from a field of artists, like to be able to compete, you have to have a lot of people who are actually applying this trade. But we as artists, a lot of times, especially when we're struggling, we take it both from the industry, but also we take it from our own families and communities, right? We get it on both ends. You know, they're pissed off that we're here, and other people, you know, want to caricaturize us. And so I think the onus also is on the community and to make sure that we do that. And one of the most important ways a show like this makes long-term impact is by showing that it is possible, to imagine yourself there, that's what you want to do, but also for the community to see that, oh my God, that is an avenue that is open to us. That is a coming of age of any immigrant community in this country. And in some ways, it's beautiful to be part of the coming of age story of our own communities with this show and other shows like it.
Yes.
I spoke to this young Muslim women's foundation at Harvard Kennedy 2 years ago, and one of the young girls, you know, was very emotional for two reasons, which I always mention. One, through tears, she told me she's never heard her language spoken on television without it being in a violent way. She'd always heard her Arabic tongue being spoken in this like horrific, violent way. And that was painful for her. And then the other ones mentioned, well, how do you handle people saying your name? Azita, how come you didn't change your name? And I think that's something that's really lovely here is that we get to hear Pashto and Dari spoken through families communicating in fights, in love, just in like a real traditional way. Which is really groundbreaking, because also a lot of the times on the shows that do feature Dari and Pashto, they're usually wrong. They're usually like Pashto and Dari mixed, or sometimes they just throw in Arabic there, and none of the producers care. They're like, just speak whatever language you speak and speak at each other. And you're like,
they call it gibberish. Like they used to just call it gibberish here. It's like, no, that's an actual language.
Opening like 24 and they're like Afghan and or something. They're all yelling Arabic, and then the other guy's yelling Pashto. And I'm like, oh my God, this is wrong. Like, but nobody knows. And they're just like, yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh. So as far as representation goes, it's really lovely to get messages from people that get to hear Awad Mir and the various names, Gul Bashar, and like all these things they get to hear on primetime.
There's two questions here. I'm going to kind of tether them together because they get to the same thing. Someone asked, there seems to be gatekeeping going on in the industry, and the show truly is remarkable at changing that. Are there educational programs or mentorship programs that will be launching through United States of Al? The second question is, how can more Afghan writers or aspiring directors and producers intern or apply to this show? A little more direct.
Well, I'll take the second one. Write to us. You know, we're not difficult to find. And write to us. We're here. We already have. What are I think 10, 11 Afghan between support staff, writers, actors. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot. But you know, it's so lovely that it's the Afghan community, to be honest with you. But I don't think for any community, this is just not the way it works. So there's a lot of people already, and we hopefully we're around long enough where we can keep, as Fahim said, we have the scaffoldings to be able to bring more people, and people from here go on to make other shows. So our writers and the writers will go on and do other shows, and then we have more people that can come in and bring in support staff. There's production stuff. I think it's really, really important because production is dominated by, it's all union work, and unions are all about working your way up. You know, it's like it's an apprenticeship. So you know, to be able to get people into the doors so that they can qualify to join the union and can work up in production jobs. Making these kinds of shows is a teamwork that includes, you know, we couldn't have made this show without our, you know, all our crew. You know, it's really important to say it's not just us writers and producers and actors. There is a huge, and there is a ton of opportunities in that space as well. So a show like this provides an opportunity to bring people on those places. And so yeah, get in touch with us if you want to get in, and we'll do it. I forgot what this first question was. Was that?
It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
It was,
right.
Yeah.
I would also like to add that my organization, the MENA Arts Advocacy Coalition, which is separate than this, but we're launching a digital database with thanks to some lovely donors that will actually, if you want to join in the next couple weeks, we'll be doing a live announcement that will be a global platform for producers, studios, and networks to access talent from these specific cultures, because people are always looking and asking us, like, I need an Iraqi speaking Arabic for the lead of Mosul. I need 3 Azita. And I'm like, okay. So we're using technology to assist in that space, and also to remove that gatekeeping that occurs in the business where you don't normally get seen on lists and whatnot. This will give producers direct access to your resume, your links of work, your photos, your biography, your country of origin, languages you speak, and all those things, so that when there is another show like US of Al or another show about Afghanistan or Iraq or Iran, they can go out there and kind of find some talent. It's not a guarantee, but it's a step to try to remove some of the gatekeeping. So check out our Instagram and Twitters and stuff for those.
You want to say what it is, Azita?
It's a digital database.
No. The address. How do they get?
It's at MENA Advocacy. So, and you know, and it's not fully announced yet, but our database is partnered with the Academy. It's new inclusion and standards. So it'll be on the Oscars website as one of their partners. So all producers for the Oscars that are looking for Oscars, that want to be nominated for the Oscars and looking for diverse talent above and below the line, will have access to our database. So it'd be cool.
Okay, and someone here asked, could you speak to the public commentary about not casting an Afghan actor in the lead role?
Sure. Well, I think that the question is kind of funny, about, because it sounds like the intention was not to cast an Afghan. Well, the intention was completely the opposite. Where we from the beginning, our whole goal was, all right, how do we get Afghans in all aspects of this? I have to tell you that we were certainly as much as adamant about making sure we have Afghans in the room. In fact, more so because that's where we felt the most difficult challenge is going to be than on screen. Like that was like, okay, we cannot have even just one Afghan is not enough in a room. Like there needs to be proper representation in the room and veterans, you know, so that was the key thing for us. With casting, the way casting works is that you put a casting call out and then you do your best to support the casting agents to get as many people that are out there to come and audition. And we saw a lot of people who were really, really good. But as Azita said, this is a multicam that at that point, pre-COVID, was still going to happen in front of a live audience. It has its own specific things. Azita has been in the industry 17 years. She says she hasn't done a sitcom yet, right? It's not an easy job. And it takes very particular skills. And you have, you know, and so we have to, at the end of the day, make a decision about who can very specifically deliver all aspects of this part, and be very objective about the people that came. You know, we saw dozens and dozens of Afghan actors from all over the place. You know, we expanded the network to other countries. You know, we're looking at Zoom auditions before Zoom was the thing that has become. But at the end of the day, Adir, you know, stood head and shoulders above everybody else. And he had all the skills that we felt was necessary. And by then we had already Afghan colleagues, and you know, and it was a decision that we made collectively. And we're, thank God we made it, because I don't think the show would be where it is without Adir. And one of the things I kept saying around promises was, you know, let's say you hire, you know, at a sitcom, suddenly something like Promises comes around, like an event that inspired Promises, I should say. An event like what happened in Afghanistan happens, most shows will just shrink away and disappear just because they're not equipped to be able to tell that story. But we had the staff to be able to tell that story. We had those perspectives. We also had the actors to be able to deliver that story. But what Adir had to carry an incredibly difficult part. I mean, it is such a difficult part to play, specifically in that episode. And he wasn't hired because he was going to be able to deliver that kind of a range, and yet he has it. And I think anyone who saw that episode can now appreciate the talent that this man has, and the sensitivity and the love he's brought to representing this community, and everything that he's doing to support, and the professionalism that he has is uncanny, you know. And that's just sometimes how things go. And I hope people will really grow to appreciate and love Adir as much as we love him and respect him, because he deserves all of it.
Yeah, and that just points to the fact that, you know, more Afghans need to be in the arts to have a larger pool to draw from for opportunities like this. Because at the end of the day, it has to serve, your talent level has to be at a level to support something like this.
Yeah, I mean, Fahim, you know, that experience on Promises is just it's so difficult. The timing is so intense, and it moves so fast. And, you know, sitcom is not like normal acting. Like, everything's in a box and it moves, like every piece of the box has to fit. And if you miss a comma or the period, then that box falls and then the whole scene collapses. And that's not like, you know, the acting that I've been, you know, come up with, which is you want to feel things, you want to experience things, you want to have the moment. And like the moments are fast. They pack thousands of moments in that. And that's just really rare. And, you know, Fahim's right. We need to continue to build more actors from our community specifically, so that we can have a larger pool to draw from. But
and there was an initial search for an Afghan lead.
I mean, even through everybody. I mean, through casting, through CBS, through the producers, through everybody was looking. I know dozens of Afghan friends that read for it and stuff that just, you know, are incredible actors and have all continued to audition for the show, and we'll find a place on it if, you know, it's right. But at the moment it wasn't. And he's been, I mean, he's so committed to honoring the culture and getting the language right. And it's really lovely.
We're gonna have to wrap up in a second. I just wanted to read someone's comment to kind of wrap this up. From Jalen Moore, it says, yes, exclamation point, exclamation point. May the sitcom show Hollywood that Afghans are here in the industry have a voice, talent, and beautiful stories to tell. I hope the success of the show inspires more showrunners and networks to create even more. Keep shining and rising. Thank you for representing and doing your best to stay authentic. That's awesome. That is beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.
Lorraine, did you get that? We have to Joseph? Yes.
Yes, I'm going to throw this back to Joseph in a second. I just wanted to say thanks to the MPAC Hollywood Bureau. I'm going to throw this back to Joseph. Sorry, this is a little messy here at the end. It was a last minute thing. Hello, Joseph.
Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lorraine. Yeah, I think we had a tech glitch in the beginning, and it was actually a blessing because I think listening to this conversation has really informed my comments even further. Yeah, I think for the foundation, it comes back to the people that this is going to help. And when we talked about doing this event with MPAC, we thought about Fahim and we thought about Azita and all of those that would come after them. But we also thought about the 400,000 Afghans who are here already. We thought about the 100,000 that are going to show up. We thought about the 6 million living outside of Afghanistan right now. And I think, I think someone made a comment about this being about opening doors. And it's interesting because it's gone from opening doors for folks like Fahim and Azita to literally opening doors in Tulsa and in Wisconsin and in Sacramento and all over Texas. And so from an AAF perspective, our hope is that we continue to have these conversations in our community, because that's really important, but also that we realize that, we've met with folks at the White House, for example, and members of Congress, but what we really need to get to is, the heart of America, right? We have to reach those people to impact the narrative building. We have to reach those people to kind of push against the threat narratives that are existing and emerging. And so, we're grateful for this opportunity, Lorraine, for you facilitating, and certainly for the folks from the show. And our hope, and I speak on behalf of Sue, is that this isn't the last conversation we have about this, and that really we try to leverage this platform and this show to help in a way that it wasn't even conceived of being able to help 3 months ago. So just want to close with that. And again, Lorraine, thank you for a phenomenal job in guiding us tonight. And to, of course, to Reza, Mahyad, Azita, and Fahim for their time.
Thank you all. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.